Today I'm going to be starting a series on prepping and having food storage. This first video is going to be about short-term food storage. I'll also do a video on long-term food storage and how I store it and the means I take. But this first video is short-term. Another term for short-term food storage is a working pantry. So basically what I'm going to show you is the pantry that we live out of every single day. This here behind me is part of it. It's a series of cupboards. You only see the top part, the bottom part. There's another series of cupboards. It's over 6 foot tall and it has lots of different cupboards. It has drawers and it has more cupboards at the bottom. And this is just part of where I store some of our pantry goods for short-term food storage. This is not my long-term food storage area. If you are building your short-term food storage, you're building it to maybe last 3, 6, or even 12 months long. And if you go on beyond 12 months, 18 months, maybe 2 years, then you're considered a long-term food storage. Anything mainly over a year is long-term food storage. And there is a difference. There's certain foods that you can't store long-term. Now, why do we prepare? Well, as we have seen recently, there's been food shortages, there's been meat, dairy, breads. They've limited you on how much you can buy, your canned goods. Food shortages can happen at any time and anywhere. So it's always wise to have at least a few weeks worth of food in your home at all times. So the reasons that we store up food for short term is just for emergency purposes. It could be weather related. It could be like we've seen this crisis of the virus that has taken this nation and worldwide. Most grocery stores only have enough food on hand to meet the needs of their community for 3 days. So that being said, if there is a run on food, store shelves are bare, they're empty. This is a reason why when the first signs of this pandemic came out, I wasn't fearful. I didn't go to the grocery store right away. I didn't start hoarding anything. And I don't feel like this is hoarding, this is just being prepared. Now, a few things you need to consider before starting your short-term food storage is where are you going to store your food? If you are like me, you might not have a lot of storage area in your home, so then you go outside of your home. I have several areas, this is just one of them, where I store my short-term food storage. So what I'm showing you now is just a portion of what we actually have on hand. But you can be creative. You can use a spare closet. You can use under your bed. You can use a spare bedroom. As long as you can keep that food from a source of heat and a source of light, you're gonna be pretty good. These cupboards here close up and they stay dark at all times. And inside, usually, these actually are cooler than the air in this room. All right, so what are some things that you would store for short-term food storage? First of all, you only buy what your family already uses. Don't go out and buy things just because they're on sale or because they're cheap to put in your food storage. I've done that before. I bought in little cans of chicken noodle soup, and it was actually years and years and years later that I went back because we just didn't eat chicken noodle soup from a can. I was cleaning out this pantry and I found the jar. It was like from 2013 or 14 and it had started to rust around the lid. So we ended up not eating that. If you purchase foods that you don't normally eat, you're kind of wasting your money because most likely you won't eat that. Find a bunch of recipes that you already make and your family enjoys and get the ingredients for those recipes, whether it be 5 or 10 recipes, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that all of your family members like what they're eating, and then buy those ingredients. And basically that's what I do here. You're not gonna find a lot of processed foods in my cupboards, and that's mainly because I do make a lot of foods from scratch, homemade. So you're gonna find ingredients and not just already canned goods that are from the store. I do have some, but not very many. I have more ingredients than I do cans of food. So in this cupboard, you can see I have a variety of different things. Here I have like berries, wheat berries, and those store for a very long time. I also have like split peas, rice. I will say that rice and wheat berries and sugar are one of the longest lasting foods. So those types of foods are foods that you would have also in your long-term food storage. This rice here, I vacuum sealed this, and I did that in 2014. Obviously we haven't eaten this yet. I tend to buy a lot of white rice just to have on hand, but is this still as good as it was the day I put it in this jar? I can guarantee you that. So 6 years later, this rice is still very good. It's not like brown rice. I do have brown rice, but brown rice does not store as long because it has the nutrition in it. It has all the oils in it, and those go rancid over time. So you cannot store brown rice like you can white rice. Also cornmeal. We love cornbread and things made with cornmeal, so I always keep cornmeal in here. Barley has been said that it doesn't last very long, but I have stored barley for a very long time and it seems to be fine. So barley is something that I also store. I love barley in my soups, so I always keep barley. I keep things in 2-quart jars and in 1-quart jars. You will see that I have some things in pint-sized jars, but those are mainly things that I dehydrate myself. This here is wheat berries. This is for grinding into flour when I run low. So that's that. I also store oats. These are old-fashioned oats. Oats store a very long time, I believe. If stored in the proper conditions, oats can last 20 to 30 years if stored in proper conditions. So those are a very long-term food storage. Another thing I like to store is, this is just a vacuum seal bag. These are tea bags. I like to have tea on hand. Tea does not have a very long shelf life, maybe a year or two, but I like to have that on hand at all times. I also like to have spices. These are cinnamon sticks. I have several recipes that use cinnamon sticks, and so I have this vacuum sealed. Now you can see that my short-term food storage does not, most of them do not have oxygen absorbers in them, and some of them do. This one is an older pasta, and I did put an oxygen absorber in this one, but almost all of these are sealed with the vacuum sealer, and I will go over that in another video as well, because I have 3 different ways of vacuum sealing these jars, and I will share with you those. Beans and legumes are something that also stores for a very long time, but the older the bean is, the more it dries out, and over years and years of storage, these beans will become very difficult to cook down. So when you soak them and start boiling them in water, they have a tendency to still be kind of crunchy even after boiled for several hours. They just continue to dry down so much that they don't soften, and they are still edible at that point, but they're just not as desirable. So what I do is I keep beans on hand, but I also can beans, not dry can, but can them in the pressure canner. So I take the oldest beans that I have, and when I'm running low on canned beans, I will take the oldest ones and can them up, pressure can them, so that they're readily available. And that is just a cheap and easy way of storing beans. So this cupboard is kind of related to baking. Some things you're gonna definitely want when there is a crisis or an emergency is something sweet to eat. At least that's for me and my family. So some things that you wanna keep on hand are sugar. This is just a raw sugar, and I put this in a jar. Let me tell you the reason I put everything in these jars. And that is because if you keep it in its original box or container or bag or whatever, you have a tendency that it could go stale, or you could get bugs and pests inside your food. That happens more times than we like, but each food has a certain amount of eggs or larvae or some type of animal product in your food. That's just how it is. And when you take the oxygen out of your food, those eggs cannot hatch. I will talk about that when I talk about Mylar bags and storing them. If you don't somehow remove the oxygen from them, then the bugs will hatch. They need the oxygen to hatch, and you will end up throwing a lot of food away because of bugs. This is why I have a lot of stuff in glass jars. Pasta is something that I have a lot of. Pasta is a very cheap meal. You can buy a box of pasta for just under $1 in some spots if it's on sale. And pasta sauce, if you don't make your own pasta sauce is actually really cheap. So you can have a pretty cheap meal, and pasta lasts a very long time also. Some of the things up here you're gonna see, these are my dehydrated herbs. This is elderflower, and you can see I've labeled it what elderflower is for and the benefits for it. I also have like ginger, and I like to buy ginger and dehydrate it myself. I feel like it's the freshest ginger. Coffee doesn't have a very long shelf life, but when you take the oxygen out of it, it seems to last a decent amount. So I keep a little bit of coffee on hand, but I don't keep a lot just because it doesn't have a very long shelf life. I also keep corn syrup on hand. I know corn syrup is not the healthiest choice, but it has a forever life shelf. This and honey and sugars, they can pretty much last forever without going bad. One more thing that I have a lot of is my different foods that I dehydrate. So I dehydrate, I freeze, and those are all short-term food storages. Those don't last forever, but they are important to have on hand. So when I dehydrate, this happens to be stevia. It's a form of sugar, and it's a pretty potent sweetener. And so when I dehydrate it, I put it in these jars and vacuum seal it, and it does last a long time. I have all kinds of things that I've dehydrated, and I will do a video on dehydrating. This happens to be stinging nettle. I do a lot of wild crafting, so you'll see that, like these elderberries, I've wild crafted. Rose hips, I wild craft. Elderberry and elderflowers. So I do a lot of wild crafting, but I also dehydrate things that we eat all the time. This happens to be sweet corn. And I have tomatoes from the gardens. These are sliced tomatoes. These are oranges. You see the oranges? And I have limes. I have all kinds of different dehydrated foods in this cupboard. Also potatoes. I do a lot of canned potatoes, but I also like to dehydrate potatoes. These are sliced potatoes, but these can last a lot longer than your canned potatoes, and they take up a lot less space. So I don't know how many potatoes are in here, but when you're canning a potato, usually you can only get, what, 5, 6 potatoes in there, depending on the size. So this dehydrating allows you to store a lot more bulk in less space. So that's why I dehydrate. Plus, I like to dehydrate like seasonings. This is celery. I do celery, I do onions, you can do garlic, all that, all your herbs. And it's really convenient when you go to make soups or just recipes. Just throw these in, especially for soups. It's really easy. Wrapping this up, I wanted just to mention, how do you start your food storage? You start it by buying what you already eat, and you start also by buying just a few extra cans or boxes of pasta, jars of pasta sauce, and then you put them away and you don't eat them right away. You just keep storing up. So every time you go to the grocery store, you buy a few extra of whatever it is that your family likes and enjoys. Try to find things on sale that you already eat, and then you can stock up that way. Okay, so this happens to be one that I don't can. I don't can sweet corn because I don't really have a lot of space for growing sweet corn. Hopefully in the future though I do. But sweet corn is something that our family eats not very often, maybe once a month or so. So we don't go through a lot, but I like to have it on hand. The thing with these cans is if you buy them on sale, you can get them in maybe a whole case of them, 12, 24, and that will get you started on storing your canned foods. Now, canned foods, you got to remember, as long as you're going to use these, this one expires in 2 years. I really can't say for all canned foods, but I think a lot of the canned foods have a shelf life of 2 years. Of course, I believe that you can go beyond that expiration date. It just says best by, and that's just because they have to put that on. The only thing I would look for is if your lids start to rust or there's bulging in the jar. Then I would not risk feeding it to your family. I would just throw it away. Okay, last thing to remember is that this is considered a working pantry, meaning you are using your short-term food storage on a regular basis. And that is because things do expire. So you want to make sure that you keep rotating. What I find beneficial is when you purchase something, you either put this in the back, move your older stuff forward, so you're always using the oldest first. Or what I've always done is write the expiration date on the jar somewhere so it's easy to see. That way you're always going to be using your oldest first. So that's kind of key for how you keep working it, you keep rotating through. So that's what a short-term pantry looks like. Of course, I have canned goods. You've probably seen those in other videos. Maybe I have a link to it up here. Where I store all my canned foods that I can myself, and then those I'm working through also. They're constantly being rotated. I'm coming into a new garden season this year, so last year's and the year before are getting eaten first before I ever open a jar of our newest, and that's just how a working pantry works. If you have any questions, I know I'm not an expert on food saving and storing, and maybe some of you have a lot more knowledge than I do. Leave your questions in the comments below. I have a great YouTube community, so I'm sure if I can't answer it, one of you guys can. Thank you again for watching, and we will catch you on the next video. Take care.